Ready for a revolution of your mind? You're listening to the Tom, Tim, and Chris Show.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Tom, Tim, and Chris radio show. This is our pilot episode. Really excited about it. We're just three everyday guys with a unique take on politics, as well as fishing and the everyday anything that consists with daily life. Now then, we all have our own differences of opinions, and we all come from different backgrounds for the most part. Chris is married with a number of children. I myself am divorced with a child of my own, and Tom is on the younger side. He's a aspiring musician here in Hernando County, Florida. What we hope to inspire you today is just to be able to think about what's going on in the state of American politics, to be able to decide for yourself what's good for the country and where you stand on certain issues. And that being said, I'd like to turn over and give brief introductions to everybody in the crew. My name is Tim, and I live here in Hernando County, Florida. I am a single father. I am a Christian. My son is 9 and goes to a local school here. He's in the 4th grade. Chris, tell us a little bit about yourself and your military experience.
Well, I did roughly 5 years active duty, and now I'm working on my 2nd year in the Guard, finishing out my IR. I'm also an EMT for a local ambulance company. You know, basically just doing the basic stuff like driving an ambulance, etc. That's pretty much about all you got from me. How about it, Tom?
Hey, what's up, guys? I'm a local musician out of Hernando County, aspiring tour this summer. I don't know, what more can we say about me, I guess?
As for right now, I guess we're going to be tackling a little bit news controversy going on in the American political scene right now. And Tom has that first coming at us with breaking news, actually. Just signed into law today, NDAA 2013. Tom's done a bit of research on this. Let's hear from him. What do you got to say, Tom?
Yeah, this actually came in at 9:44 this morning. Yeah, President Obama signed the National Defense Authorization Act of 2013. I actually just got this through. Section 1021 of the last one, as you know, gave the military the power to arrest and hold Americans, basically, without the writ of corpus.
Well, Chris, what do you think about that?
To be honest with you, I think that's completely unpatriotic, unconstitutional, and if anyone participates in that, regardless of whether it's signed into law or not, if anyone participates in that, I believe that's a treasonous act. I can't, it's hard for me to even say the word treason, because I will throw it around quite often, but I think flat out that anyone using this and getting caught using this should actually themselves be thrown in jail for the rest of their lives because it's completely un-American and unconstitutional.
And, you know, I think a lot of our listeners would probably agree with that. Now, we do have a special guest on the show right now. This is Dan. He is quite the learned gentleman and very well-spoken. He has a very in-depth take on what we're talking about here. And, Dan, if you're there, I can get you on the air here with us and get your take on this NDAA 2013.
Hi, I'm Dan. National Defense Authorization Act is, like Chris said, completely unconstitutional. It is a treasonous offense. And the signers and promoters and sponsors of the bill, I think, need to be persecuted and prosecuted. That's just me.
Well, for the average person out there, and I don't mean to interject there, but I would like to get you to talk a little bit about what the NDAA, and that is the National Defense Authorization Act, and what it encompasses and what it does for the rule of law here in America, because I'm not sure everyone is aware, but I know there's probably a few people out there wondering what it is. Can you talk a little bit to that?
Yeah, it's an extended act of Congress, but it was written specifically ambiguously under the guise of protecting us against terrorists. What can happen as a result of that is indefinite detention. You do not even, to arrest somebody, you do not even have to state what they're being arrested for. You can simply take and term them a terrorist. We can go into a long litany of what else it says, but it's basically just an ambiguous statement to be able to violate any liberties and freedoms, from phone call tapping to just being pulled over by the national the Department of Homeland Security can pull you over. It gives a whole bunch of different executive branches a lot more power and undermines the liberties and the freedoms of the citizens, completely wipes them out.
Now that sounds a lot.
What you're getting at is that the government can arrest you, hold you indefinitely without trial or any kind of hearing for any reason that they seem fit.
Exactly, and there are people that are in prison, American citizens that have been detained and incarcerated, and their families still have no knowledge of why they were detained and why they are being incarcerated or when they will be released, and don't have any court hearing.
Even more frightening where they are in a lot of cases.
That's true.
Yeah, they just deport you to some island in the Caribbean and Gitmo, and where there's a huge prison situation. We also have multiple prisons throughout the states here that people can be indefinitely detained at under the guise of FEMA camps, where you just move somebody that is in a desperate situation and maybe a hurricane or something like that. But they're all prison compounds.
Well, from my point of view, it's really seeming a lot like it's just suspicion. And I don't want to dive too much into history, but if we look at the 1940 internment camps of the Japanese American citizens here in this country, it's almost like we're letting our own Congress play the fear card with us. And I don't want to say, dive too much into 9/11 on this show, on this particular show, but I'm sure we'll get to that. And it's like they're using that fear and the threat level orange or whatever, I guess they dropped that now that the Democrats are in office, but they're using that to play on our emotions and allow us to think things that may not be considered rational thoughts. Tom, what do you think about that?
Well, there was a Joseph Stalin quote, I believe it is, regarding government protection. It's unconstitutional, obviously, but the fact of the matter is the fact that the government can even dictate to you, but you can arrest someone without a trial and determine that he's guilty before, it's ridiculous.
I actually agree with you. I see where you're going with that. Now, Chris has spent some time serving tour of duty in Afghanistan.
That's correct.
So having that experience with you and working with the military, what's your take on that?
Well, it's quite simple. If an American soldier were to approach you and threaten to arrest you under NDAA, you would simply say something along the lines that you, soldier, have sworn an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution, not the President, not the generals, not any laws, just the Constitution, from foreign and domestic, and if you arrest me, you are violating that oath, and you can and will be tried for treason. I don't know how far that'll go with the soldier, but that is the God's honest truth, because all soldiers, officers, and enlisted all swear an oath to defend the Constitution. We're the only country in the world that does this. All other armies in the world swear an oath to defend their leader, to defend their generals, to defend whatever, but we're the only country in the world that defends that offers a oath to the Constitution, to our most sacred laws.
In my time in the Navy, when I swore my oath, there was also a brief sentence having to do with obeying the lawful orders of my superiors. Is that still the case?
Yes, that is still the case. In fact, that there are officers out there that encourage junior enlisted soldiers to stand up for the right thing by calling out unlawful orders, which has happened in the case of Bravo Company 2-1 Infantry. There was a squad of soldiers in Afghanistan that was arrested because their squad leader ordered them to open fire on innocent civilians, and all of them are facing life in jail, and I believe the squad leader himself is actually facing the death penalty for giving the unlawful order to have these people kill these innocent civilians and take even war trophies such as pieces of ears or fingers.
Yeah, those things have been around since for a long time. I can talk to the Vietnam era where people skinned out heads and collected ears and such like that. But the bottom line is that yes, we swore our oaths. My oath, being 57 years old, is still in effect. I've never rescinded it, nor shall I. And that's a perfect thing to bring up if you are ever detained. Unfortunately, I don't know whether Department of Homeland Security people take that oath. I know that only about the United States military personnel.
And even as private citizens, when you're talking about standing up against unlawful orders, and I would take that so far as to include unlawful laws. And that was just the ideology of creating this government and the United States Constitution and this country as a whole back in 1776. We are going to move right along here to our next topic, but before we do, Tom brought up the subject of NDAA 2013, so I'd like to give him the last word on that. Tom, what's your last word?
My last word on this is the fact that the courts actually dismissed this. We have a court ruling on this. The fact that they're going to pass it again shows how low the government's opinion of the American people is right there, how arrogant they are, how low they think of us. That's basically what it is. And one more interesting note, I actually just got this in too. You were talking about the military having the power to arrest and whatnot. This is related to the gun control thing. Wyoming's actually has a law in the legislation right now where whether it be military or any federal agent or whatnot, if they come to Wyoming and try to arrest someone and take their guns, they will actually be charged. So you're actually seeing states disagreeing with these, there not be detention acts or different acts to tell you what you can and can't do.
Well, let me give a shout out to Wyoming then. Congratulations to you guys for standing up for the way that this country was meant to be built, where local supersedes state and state supersedes federal.
I'm kind of wishing we had a little sound bit here of an audience applause, but as we are just doing this from our own homes as average citizens, I think that's just awesome. I mean, here, Wyoming. All right, guys. Well, we're going to move right along here, and the next article of business that I wanted to bring up to everybody, especially to our listeners. And it goes a little bit to what Tom was just saying about the average American public and the way Congress views us, and that they think we're ignorant. They think we're going to vote for whoever doesn't receive receives the least amount of negative media attention. But what I'm going to go with here is the fiscal cliff, and I want a little bit about this is that we've got the share tax cuts that expired. We've got tax raises on Americans making over $400,000 a year, couples that make over $450,000 a year, and then we have suspended talks about the debt ceiling. Well, the debt ceiling is basically we have borrowed as much as we allowed ourselves to borrow, and now we're coming to the point where we can't borrow anymore. The debt ceiling is basically that. We want to raise that debt ceiling and allow us to borrow more, whether it's from the Federal Reserve or it's from a private country or whatever. One of the things Obama said during his first election bid was that any talk of raising the national debt, and I believe this is a direct quote, was a treasonous act. And he was talking about Bush at the time. Now, I don't think any of us have any love lost Bush, but now that he's going after Boehner, and that is the House Speaker, he's talking a lot about how the Republicans and the GOP, he's quoted as saying it's irresponsible and absurd that they would offset this debt ceiling talk and not pass any agreement now. And then, of course, there's been a backwards talk about the minting of a $1 trillion coin. I don't personally think that's going to happen. But, I mean, what do we think about this, guys? Where is this nation headed with its debt talks and increased debt and spending? Chris, this would be a good time because you actually were employed by the U.S. government quite a while, working with the military. What do you think about this? And speak a little bit about your access to state-of-the-art technology while over there. I'd love to hear about what kind of stuff you were getting as opposed to what they're saying we need.
Okay, well, first of all, if we're talking about technology while we're overseas, it is true we do get a lot of the best stuff. For example, we found a drone that was crashed, a Predator drone that was crashed, and we had to go pick it up. Another example was the Blue Force Tracker, also known as an FBCB2, which constantly broke down, constantly fed wrong information, constantly misaligned satellites, etc., etc. Stryker's top-of-the-line vehicles for the military right now. An 8-wheeled vehicle. It's the sister or cousin of the Marines' amphibious LAAV, LAV. Top-of-the-line, state-of-the-art stuff that just plainly and simply doesn't work, nor do we have the money to fix it, because one vehicle, one Stryker infantry carrier variant, $1.2 million just for one vehicle, not including the computer systems or the weapons or anything like that. Now, as far as the fiscal cliff goes and all this and the debt ceiling, the way I see it is I've always been told my entire life that once you're in a hole and you find yourself in a hole, you need to stop digging. The second that this country went from $0 to negative, we needed to stop all spending and fix it right then and there. But everybody decides that, oh, well, we need to keep borrowing to spend more, and it's just absolutely ridiculous. It's completely and utterly out of control.
No, I think a lot of the American public would agree with you on that, especially when you got people that are now paying a lot more in taxes and are barely able to pay their own bills. And they don't ask for government assistance. They don't want it. They don't require it. They don't sign up for it. Tom, what do you think about this debt limit, this economic crisis we're facing? Think there's any way of getting out of it?
Here's the thing. This is comparable to the fall of the Roman Empire. I mean, the fact of the matter is they had all these different programs. They overinflated their money. Well, we shouldn't have inflation, period. But, I mean, we're in that similar situation. The fact of the matter is, but from a spending standpoint, too, if something costs $1.50 and you only have $1, you can't afford it. It's like, it doesn't make any sense, and that's basically what the government's doing. But on top of the spending, the very currency that is being used, they keep printing it and printing it. We are going to get to a point where it's like when you slice a pizza. You can only slice a pizza so thin, and we're going to get to the point where there's nothing short of a thin strip left. The Soviet ruble collapse, I think, is going to be comparable to what's going to happen over here. But the thing that scares me about this country is and I was talking to a man who was in the Soviet Union when this happened, Ivan Seslak at the Board of County Commissioners, and he spoke of how he used the analogy that the chainsaw builder knew that he could trade something for food or, something like that. I don't think the average American knows that they can do that, and I think we are going to be in a lot of trouble in the next 10 to 20 years.
Well, that's definitely the way a lot of America is seeing it right now, and a lot of us are worried. Now, you spoke to inflation and the giant monster that is, and of course printing money. Dan, can you give us a little bit of insight as to, I don't think many people understand where the money is printed from. We do print our money, but we go through a private bank, do we not?
It's interesting, really, that we don't go through a private bank. What we do go through is the Bureau of Printing and Engraving. However, nowadays, the printing and engraving is their presses are being told to operate not Congress, that is the way it's supposed to be done in the Constitution, but rather by the Federal Reserve Bank, a private organization, a banking cartel, if you will, that is giving the marching orders to the printing presses outside of the legislation, the legislation's approval. They've been given carte blanche through since their formation in 1897, and then their beginning bank in 19. They have grown and grown and grown in power to the point that they can do things without legislative approval. They've gleaned that much control over not just the money supply, but the economy of our nation. It was Amschel Rothschild said decades before the formation of the Federal Reserve Bank, if I control a country's economy, I care not who runs it. That being said, I think that should strike terror in every red-blooded American's heart, and perhaps we should completely and totally end our dependence upon Federal Reserve Bank loans. We'll immediately, of course, go into such a devastating economic crisis. If the government stays out of it, and we cut down, or the government stays out of it, other than cutting down its expenses dramatically in the trillions of dollars instead of hundreds of millions, but trillions of dollars of spending cuts, we might have a chance to get through it in like 4, maybe 5 years. But the fiscal cliff that we're going over right now, and have been going over for probably about 7 or 8 years, is nothing that we're going to get through in the next 10 years or so. Perhaps I'm wrong, but I'm stockpiling seeds just in case.
Well, that does take me to a topic I want to talk about maybe in a future show about farmers being able to having to register the seeds that they keep from their own crop. But, we're not going to discuss that now. I'm not sure if anybody else has anything wanted to add to this topic, but I do want to say that, and I know, forgive me, but I'm going to quote Bloomberg Business Week here, and oil has dropped from the highest level in 4 months based on the debt ceiling talks, and I think that has a lot to do with the fact that many countries just, from a AAA rated bonded, currency as the American dollar is down to a AA, and I'm just wondering if a lot of countries even take our currency seriously anymore. We were supposed to be the world reserve currency. I'm not sure how accurate or right that is, but it seems like faith in America on a world scale is dropping dramatically. But we are going to move right along. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Interesting that you mentioned that because about the strength of the dollar, because China is now the official crude oil currency for the Chinese yuan. So that brings up the question: what backing does the dollar even have now? It's not even a petrodollar.
It's not gold and silver, that's for sure. But I do want to move right along as we're going to try and streamline this show, as this is our first pilot episode, and I feel like we're doing real well. Chris, I know there was something we were talking about last night that was really right up your alley, and something you were very passionate about. And I don't have my notes in front of me. I feel bad about that, but it was either Benghazi or it was the Second Amendment, and I'm sure they both have a lot to do with each other. But I want to let you go ahead and take this and let our viewers and our listeners know what's going on in that.
First of all, let's talk about Benghazi for a second. And I hate to say this about our own people and our own country, but it's the God's honest truth that this country has about a 10 to 15 second attention span. And if you notice, Benghazi was only on the news for about 2 weeks, right before it, during, and right after the election. And I believe it was a big ploy, basically, a big election scam. But 4 Americans are dead. Nothing has been done about it. Hillary Clinton hasn't stood trial yet, hasn't been questioned about it because of some quote-unquote migraine or headache or concussion or whatever, because she got drunk and fell down and hit her head, whatever the reason. It's absolutely ridiculous that nobody has brought this to light. And that goes along with the Fast and the Furious, how everything that has anything to do with guns in this country, giving them away, or a terrorist attack is just swept under the rug like it doesn't even matter. It's absolutely ridiculous to even think that nobody's looking into the deaths of 4 innocent Americans for no reason on the anniversary of September 11th, nonetheless.
And this took place at a U.S. embassy, didn't it?
Yes. So technically, that's an attack on American soil. So if you want to be completely technical and literal to the translation of that, that's an act of war. If you attack American soil and American citizens on American soil, that is an act of war.
Yeah, no, I definitely feel you on that. I don't think, Americans don't like to be attacked anywhere. Obviously, I don't think anybody does. That's just reasonable to say. But when you do it on your own homeland or on your own soil, and that is, every embassy, they are given that right, as we treat, the ambassadors from other nations here in this country as existing and operating on their own soil when they're here at their embassy. It's absurd to me that and you're right, it's the attention span of the American public, and it's absurd to me that attention span is stuck on the latest, I don't know, Jersey Shore episode or whatever. I think it's been canceled, thank God, but I know there's more than a few that have come up to take its place with other junk, and they're not worried about the deaths of average Americans, especially when they're overseas working for, I guess, democracy, although we're republic, so that kind of bewilders me a little bit. Dan, now you have also done military service, and you are quite learned in the aspect of just general liberty. What's your take on this Benghazi situation?
Well, I had a question. How many United States embassies have been attacked besides the one in Benghazi? Was there another one, Chris? Maybe?
Yeah, the one in, say again?
Libya?
Yes, the one in Libya was attacked as well.
How about Egypt?
I wasn't aware of Egypt.
Okay, maybe it's just Libya and I'm getting them confused, but had I been a soldier or in defense of the embassy, I do not believe that if any of me or the people that I served with back when I was in the service, if that would have happened, we would expended all our ammunition and ordnance in the defense of our country. And
well, let's talk about that for a second, Dan. I do believe it was Petraeus that said they were going to send in a detachment of Marines to help and rescue these people at Benghazi, and the order was given to stand down. They had an entire battalion of Marines ready to go in. They flew them over to Italy to get them in there. And during this 8 to 16 hour firefight between these Navy SEALs and Ambassador and this group of terrorists, and they were ordered to stand down.
I believe that the person that gave that order, in the very essence of the naval term keel, should be keelhauled.
I agree.
Not once, maybe twice or thrice.
Let's move on to the subject of the Second Amendment. Speaking of guns and terrorist attack, and let's move on to the subject of the Second Amendment and gun control. My first and foremost objective here is to explain to people what the Second Amendment means to me personally, and that is the defense of my property, my family, my home, everything that I own and hold dear, against my government. Not against my neighbor, not against the criminal down the street. It's, to me, it is to defend against my government. Somebody once asked me, why do I need a quote-unquote assault rifle with a 30-round magazine to go hunting? And I said, I don't need it to go hunting. I need it because my government has a fully automatic machine gun. That's why I need a semi-automatic quote-unquote assault rifle with a 30-round magazine that can shoot, 60 rounds a minute, depending on how quickly I can reload and how fast I can pull the trigger, really. That's another point I'd like to get at. There's no such thing as an assault rifle. An assault is a behavior. It's a verbal lashing. That's what an assault is. If you look at any police charge, there's assault and battery. Assault is the verbal damaging of somebody in some way. It's verbal. It's not a physical act. It's not anything in that nature whatsoever. So to say something is an assault rifle, I don't know about you guys, but any weapon I've ever picked up has never yelled at anybody or swore at them or cursed at them. How about you guys?
It doesn't have a body, mind, or soul, so can't make a decision for itself.
That's an interesting point. I mean, Tom, what's your take on that? I know we got the body, mind, and soul argument, and I'm inclined to agree with you. I mean, I have cursed at my handgun once in a while every time it jams up on me, but Tom, as a newly acquired gun owner and proponent of the Second Amendment, what's your take on all this assault weapons ban talk and everything else coming out of the actually it appears to be coming out of the left more than the right, but the right seems to be conceding a little bit.
I think it's stupid. When the Second Amendment was written, I believe it was Benjamin Franklin who put it in just in case we had to rebel against the government, which, albeit he most likely predicted. But you look at let's move on to the modern day. Let's take a look at Chicago, who has the strictest gun control laws in the nation. I dare anybody listening to this to look at their murder rate.
Oh, they've already had 24 murders this year and 80 wounded in firearms-related incidents.
These facts off the FBI website, correct?
Yes.
Okay. I would like to point out that every 22.2 seconds, a violent crime is committed somewhere in the U.S. Every 36.6 seconds, an aggravated assault occurs somewhere in the U.S. Every 1.2 minutes, a robbery occurs somewhere in the U.S. Every 30.9 minutes, there's a murder. These statistics are taken straight off the FBI's Uniform Crime Report. Yep. And according to the One National Institute of Justice survey of convicted felons, 68% of all robberies are committed with handguns, illegally obtained. Just pointing that out, illegally, because you'll hardly ever see. I can't say you'll hardly ever see. It's like a 1/100% that a law-abiding citizen will take his or her handgun and go commit a crime with it. It is absolutely ridiculous to even state that a law-abiding citizen would do something of that nature.
Now, I want to clarify for our listeners that you did say 68% of robberies are done with a handgun, and less than 1% of law-abiding handguns. As 8% are done illegally. I'm assuming the other 32% are some sort of inanimate object, i.e. a knife or something like that. I mean, I guess not guns an inanimate object unless put in the other hand. But that's interesting. And I'd love to see if anybody has, or any of our listeners could get to us with a specific, say, geographic location of that based on who has the strictest gun control laws.
Okay, well let's talk about gun control exactly. Gun-free zones were initially designed to reduce levels of violence in a let's say, albeit a testosterone-charged atmosphere, such as high school. Two important issues appear with gun-free zones. First, in bloody aftermath of school shooting, it's meant to deter and incapacitate values of shooters, basically. What it really actually does is creates a smorgasbord for violent criminals, basically saying, oh, there's a gun-free zone, I know I'm not going to have any resistance when I go there to start murdering children and teachers. There's absolutely nothing, if you go into a zone knowing that the good guys don't have guns, where would you go? A place where you know that people do not have any way to defend themselves, or would you go to a place that you're not sure of? To me, it just makes sense.
That's just common sense right there.
For the lack of shootings at police stations and whatnot. Now, Dan, you definitely have a history of learned behavior and definite research regarding, from a historical point of view, gun control and how it has affected various nations and various populaces. What's your take on the Second Amendment and the proposed assault weapons ban that's being talked about now?
Well, I know that before we had hardly any controls. We didn't appear at the times to have as much violent crime activity within what are today gun-free. Looking back at the Kent State Massacre, where 4 people that had nothing to do with the demonstration were killed by government. I don't see, we didn't declare gun-free zones during that time, and as was that they talked about their line in the social media, but I thought the point was well made. Looking back during those times, kids would carry a shotgun right to town to get over to a rabbit field that was on the other side of a little Pittsburgh town, and nobody raised an eye at them. It was normal behavior. People going back probably 70 years before that, 80 years before that, people were carrying weapons on their sidearms, on their hips, and sometimes they came to blows with some other person, in which case they basically took one or the other out of the gene pool, and I'm not so sure that was a terrible thing. Hamilton Burr, had a duel. Kind of things served a certain function, and to remove one's ability to protect their families while they take them out into the public stream, I think is criminal at best and malevolent at worst.
Well, let's just say, for posterity's sake, that people think that the Constitution needs to be interpreted and not taken for its literal face value, which, to my perspective, that would just be the sign of a complete and utter retard that has zero intelligence.
You might be right.
Yes, folks, I did just say retard. Yes, I did. Sue me. I don't care. Basically, the right to bear arms, to keep and bear arms, shall not be infringed. To me, that basically means that no matter what type of gun or firearm or weapon I want to defend my possessions, my family, anything I own or want to defend from my government shall not be regulated. It's as simple as that.
Of course it is.
Yeah.
And I know that some people will bring in the argument a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. They're misconstrue that with only for the military, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Well, that's the militia at that point in time was
the civilian,
the people. The people. They would comprise the militias. We still have militias to if my country gets attacked, I will be a militia of one.
Let's talk about militia, because this to me is what a militia is. There you have your federal militia, which is the Army, Marine Corps, the Air Force, the Navy. That's your federal militia. And then your regular militia, a well-regulated militia, for example, should be comprised of civilians. My neighborhood, for example. If my neighborhood got together in a meeting and said, well, let's be a militia. Let's defend our homes and everything like that. You know, that is allowed. That is allowed, and nobody could tell you otherwise. Because this is prime example why you would need something of that magnitude. Well, you not necessarily would need that, but police, for example, do not stop crime. They only show up after the crime is committed. And you have to be ready to defend yourself and brother next to you and your sister next to you. You have to be ready to defend them as they have to be ready to defend you until the cops get there. And if you think otherwise, then you deserve every bad thing that happens to you. You deserve to be robbed, and you deserve to have your house broken into and your wife raped or your kids killed. I'm not really meaning that you deserve that to happen, but I wish that on nobody. But that's what's going to happen. That's what's going to happen. If you sit there and say, guns need to be banned and nobody but the military and the police should have guns, then when the criminal comes into your house, you have nobody to blame but yourself.
Maybe is that you actually have a responsibility to defend your family and protect them. Let's just, going back and you have the responsibility to protect your family financially, protect them against the weather, with home and clothing and such. You have the responsibility to feed your family and healthy food. So certainly have the responsibility to defend your family as well. And to be able to defend yourself is the reason, especially against anything that's tyrannical, the right to bear arms.
Going back to what Chris was saying about the interpretation of the Constitution and treating it like it's a living document and modifying it to what we believe or what we come to believe, rather than interpreting it exactly, the very definition of militia is a military force of civilians to supplement a regular army in an emergency, or an army composed of ordinary citizens rather than professional soldiers. That by very definition, it empowers the people. And I don't think any one of us is going to disagree that the Constitution was not written, but written to constrain a tyrannical government, as we saw at the Revolutionary time. And that's where it comes from. The actual literal definition of militia and the literal interpretation of the Constitution is not an interpretation at all. It was written very specifically, and it gives the rights to the people. Guys, I'd like to end this with a little segment that we're going to try out here. It's going to be a quick shout out or a call out, more so for those in government or those elected officials that we have that are just, they're not right, they're not acting constitutionally, and even more so, they're not really acting in the way the constituents have elected them to do so. Chris, go ahead, man. I know you got somebody on your mind you want to shout out.
Yes, I do. Let's talk about Dianne Feinstein. The C word I'd like to use for her. She basically is saying we need to ban these guns, and they serve no purpose except for military. Yet you turn around and look at her bodyguards; they carry MAC-10s, submachine guns, and she herself carries a handgun, which is one of the things she wants to ban. I would just like to say that Dianne Feinstein is the of the year, and she deserves to be drug out in the street and savagely beaten. Anybody who thinks that it's a bad idea to arm the populace is just absolutely, in my mind's eye, just absolutely one of the dumbest people on the face of this earth.
All right. Well, how about you, James? Is there any elected official, whether in your local area or on the national political scene, that you just like to say, hey, how's it going? Why'd you do this?
Or maybe, what were you thinking?
Or maybe, what were you thinking?
The list is long and distinguished, as they say. Dianne Feinstein is right up there, and also the head military officer that gave the stand-down order to the troops of Benghazi.
I believe that was the commander-in-chief himself, but there's
Bingo.
no proof of this. But
Well, Tom,
nobody
how about
admitted
you?
to it.
I know Tom's got a list, and yeah, they're few. He's got a couple people here in his local area that kind of tick him off. Tom, who do you want to call out to and give a shout out to, and just say, hey, you screwed up?
Tom, I think your microphone is still off.
Yeah, I think we got a little problem, but that's okay. We're going to give him an extra. We'll give him 2 call outs next show. It'll be okay. Now as for me, there's just so many. I'm gonna go back a little bit, and I'm gonna call out Bush. Bush, Doug, what the hell were you thinking, man? I mean, come on. Were you just a pawn? Was that the plan from the get-go? Patriot Act? You're supposed to be a Christian, right? I mean, you're supposed to be a follower of the teachings of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, regardless of whatever you may believe. To our listeners, I myself am a Christian. Bush was very anti-Christian. I mean, he'll have to answer for it when the day comes. But I am calling out Bush. I think you completely ruined this country. You gave the Democrats the tool they needed to keep the man in power that they have now for an extra 4 years. And now we're seeing, for the total of the last 16 years, we're seeing a thing play out, a timeline, if you will. And you really screwed the pooch, man. You should have been impeached, and now your president should be impeached as well. I'll tell you what, guys. This has been Tom, Tim, and Chris on the Tom, Tim, and Chris Show. It's been a pleasure having you with us. We're going to be doing this probably once every week, and we'd like to be able to get the news in the political spectrum and our ideologies into your hands and let you make your own free and informed decision. Liberty is something that is not guaranteed to us. It is something that has to be fought for. Thomas Jefferson said, the price of freedom is eternal vigilance, and that's what we're trying to do. I am Tim. I've had a wonderful time doing the show. I can't wait to do as many more. Hope to see you guys. And in the link below, you will find a link to our chat. We will all be on our chat immediately following this broadcast. You can talk to us. You can give us your opinions. We can tell you why they're wrong. It's been a pleasure. Y'all have a safe night, and we'll hope to see you again next week.
The message of freedom endured every tyrant or second-rate despot the world's ever known, and for one simple reason, the people have kept it alive. And with no end in sight to the level of violence that men in high places will sink for to silence the will of the people. In you it must survive. Where freedom's the answer, so what is the question? Resist the advances of force and aggression, and leave to your children the promise of something more. As God is my witness, I'll be a slave no more. So dear, a peace so sweet, to be purchased with chains from our necks to our feet. Forbid this, Lord, I know not what is left.